Welcome to the third Payatu webinar hosting during this lockdown period. I hope everyone is safe and in good health. Just before starting the webinar, I have few housekeeping announcements for you. First of all, my name is Pratik Kumare. I manage the media team at Payatu and I will be one of the hosts for this webinar. Secondly, those who are attending the webinar on Zoom platform, there is an option of chat at the bottom of this Zoom window. So if you have any questions related to IoT security, then you can ask your questions during the webinar by typing into the chat window. Arun will try to answer the maximum questions at the end of this webinar. Before handing over the stage to my co-host Arun, for those who don't know much about Payatu, I would like to talk about what we do at Payatu. So we are a research-powered cybersecurity services and training company. We protect the reputation of enterprises. Payatu was formed in 2011, and so far it has been a roller coaster ride. Payatu has become a pioneer in the sphere of IT security through groundbreaking ideas, innovation, and learnings. We work with the community and we are a part of InfoSec communities around the world. We organize Nullcon and Hardware.io, renowned security conferences. These forums are empowering the world to build a better security ecosystem in Asia, Europe, and USA. Payatu's products include CloudFirst Exploity. CloudFirst is a platform that lets you test your codes for bugs by running your software with millions of test cases with a technique called fuzzing. And Exploity is a framework designed for security testing of IoT infrastructure and products. Its primary purpose is to automate security test cases and ease the learning curve for various attacks by providing a convenient user interface and hardware accessories. Also, Payatu's service offerings include quality and professional IT security consulting and IT security training. Here you can see what type of services we provide at Payatu. We also offer a full IoT ecosystem security assessment, including hardware, cloud, web, and mobile interface. We have been organizing advanced training in conferences around the globe. A few of the names include Black Hat, DEF CON, Nullcon, RuCon, and then besides Las Vegas as well. Next, we can help you better the security posture of your organization with advanced security testing and development tools and tactics. If you have a security services and training requirements for your organization, you can share those requirements with the link mentioned in this slide. Someone from our team will contact you after you fill out this form, which is there on the Payatu website. I will also share this link in the chat for your convenience. So without further delay, let's get started with today's webinar. Arun will be talking about how to get started with IoT pen testing and hands-on approaches for firmware reversing and for finding bugs on the classic router and other gateways. Let me introduce Arun. Arun works as an IoT security researcher at Payatu and has worked on numerous smart device pen tests in the past couple of years. He has 6+ years of hands-on experience in both building and breaking IoT devices. Arun, thanks for joining us today, and over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Pratik. That's a good and quick intro. Yeah, so now I will start with the slides.
Yeah, I'll stop my sharing and you can start sharing your slides and continue with the webinar.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. So I guess it's after lunch. I think most of you all will be almost sleepy. So I'll make sure I will cut down on the slides much because slide is just, I'm going to give you a little bit of whatever I'm going to teach you about in the slides. And then I'll focus mostly on the hands-on where I take a firmware, reverse it, and finding issues and stuff. Yeah, so before I get started, I can give you a little bit about who I am. So I work as a security researcher at Payatu Software Labs. So I've been with the company for close to around 3 years. and my primary day job is to basically do research and pen test on technology which involves hardware, wireless, and firmware. And I also pretty much do other stuff slightly into web, Android, all the other infosec jargons. And I'm also a hardware maker, or at least I used to be. And also I regularly speak and do training at conferences like Black Hat, DEF CON, PSDA, Hack in Paris, NullCon, and so many other. Yeah. So today I'm not going to go back to what exactly is IoT and then what are the issues in IoT. So before that, I will I will give a quick sorry. Yeah. So before that, I will give a very quick gist on what exactly is firmware or how is it related to IoT. So IoT, if you know the definition, it's basically connecting any kind of thing which connects to the real world, and then it can be connected to the internet. Which means, let's say if you're a smart band basically records your, let's say, heart rate, and then it sends to the phone, and then your phone communicates to the cloud, and then you have a web dashboard and all the fancy stuff, and then you see it. And the list is so many. There are so many domains like industrial automation, home automation, medical automation. So that is overall about IoT. So firmware is very important because one, uh, so far there are a lot of research that has been run in a normal application level, but there's not much happening in the firmware level. So there's a huge difference between when you talk about a whole application and a whole firmware. For example, your mobile phone. So your mobile phone comes with, for example, Android. So Android is more of a general purpose operating system. But if you look at it, the Android may be same. Let's say Android 10. Android 10 may be same for all the Android phones. But for example, if a specific phone is running on Qualcomm, so they will have to have a specific feature which converts your OS command to the hardware level. Similarly, if the phone is using MediaTek microprocessor, then they will have a specific call to talk to the hardware. So firmware is basically that. So in a normal case, your OS is just an OS. So where that could be more hard. Rarely it's more hardware specific, but in most of the cases, it's basically your firmware hardware specific. So what happens is like there is one layer called as your kernel and then your mood footer, which basically converts all your hardware level processing to your OS. Yeah. So let's go into it. So firmware, you will actually see it where if you are talking more about embedded system. So for example, you may again ask a question. For example, I'm running a laptop and then my laptop is running on Windows or Linux. And do I have a firmware there? There, the answer is also yes and also no. So for example, if you take a standard laptop, so laptop has something called as BIOS. And BIOS is basically the firmware. So your Windows 10 or your Ubuntu may be more standard, but the firmware is going to be hardware dependent. So that your BIOS or your thing, that is going to tell the OS that this is how you have to perform to run a specific task. So firmware is, yeah. So firmware is exactly that. So your OS is basically your Linux or your Windows, and then user space is where you have all your application level data and everything. So bootloader is the code which translates your hardware level API communication to your OS, and then OS talks like a normal language. Yeah. So there are so many bootloaders that are there. The most common bootloader you will see in most of the embedded devices are your U-boot, Red Boot, and some rare cases you will find something called a bad boot. But in most cases, whichever I have tested so far, I have encountered like a lot of U-boot ones. Yeah. So second one is OS. Again, OS can be literally anything. It could be your standard Linux-based, Linux kernel-based OS, or even if it is most of your car's infotainment system, these days also they run on Windows CE. And if you're talking about a little bit more critical operation, then people go for something called RTOS. RTOS is just a concept, real-time operating system, but VxWorks is like on Cisco iOS, they're sort of like a RTOS. Yeah. So on the right side, we see a file system. File system is again exactly same like your normal desktop machine file system. So you have your FAT, NTFS, ext4, SWAP. So here, there are a little bit more other file system like SquashFS, CramFS, UPFS. So they are more specifically made for embedded device because they have a low footprint. So on the left side, you can see there is something called as compression. So when you talk about embedded system, compression is very crucial because in your normal laptop machines, so the compression is not actually there. So all your file system in the hard disk, they're actually there. But the compression is very important in terms of any embedded device. One, it's because your whole point of embedded device is to run in a very small memory constrained environment. So what they will usually do is like they will have a small ROM chip, for example, let's say 4 MB or 8 MB. So they compress the whole OS inside the NAND flash, your NAND flash or SPI flash. So what happens is like during the boot, your bootloader will actually extract all the content from the flash memory, and then it will place it inside the RAM. And then it will start the entire OS from the RAM. And whenever it needs to write something, then the RAM will send a write request to the SPI flash or NAND flash, and then it will change there dynamically. So all your embedded system will be mostly running directly from the RAM. That's why compression is very important, because the firmware which you download or the firmware which you extract from the hardware, they'll be all compressed version of the user space on the OS. Yeah. So this is all a bit more introduction. So the next question is like, okay, fine, I have a device. So how do I get the firmware? I'll start from the bottom, from the web interface, because people are more familiar with that part. Yeah, so a web part is basically the standard one which you see in most of the times. For example, router. So in router, the common way is like you go to, let's say, TP-Link or D-Link, you download the firmware, and then you use the web console, and then you flash it. So there you actually can have a firmware because you are downloading it from the website, you have the firmware. Then you can go and extract it or do whatever modifications you want. So that is for your standard routers. So, but for example, if you're dealing with some other device, for example, the car's infotainment system, they don't have a web interface. So they will have only USB port. For example, let's say if you want to play something from a pen drive. So there they have to implement only the USB as the only way to update the firmware. So where the typical standard would be like, again, download the firmware from the internet, put that firmware file inside the USB stick, and then you can do a firmware update. Yeah. So these last two are more standard and typical, where anyone can blindly, okay, fine, this is the firmware, so I can start with it directly. But in a lot of cases, let's say a bit more of a complicated device. For example, if you have a smart hub or a smart gateway, and that gateway is already connected to the internet. So that is the case where you don't actually need to have a USB interface or web interface for the user to actually start the firmware update. So either one way is like a device can directly talk to the cloud. For example, the server will send a command like, I have a new firmware, do you want to update it? Either user can say yes or no. But there they will not actually have a way to get the firmware, because everything is actually running directly from the device and you don't have access to the internal of the device. So their attack scenario would be more of, for example, you can put a proxy, and then you can see, let's say you can create like sort of a proxy to your server and then see what commands it's actually sending to the server. In most of the cases where I have found is like basically one of the AI speaker which I tested, I have root access to the device. So in the log file, they actually send a command saying like wget and then the whole URL. So from there I was able to get it. So the second one is basically, first one is basically simple, like the cloud is all automatically downloads the firmware. The second one is we have something called as mobile in the middle. So this is mostly the case for the device hardware devices, which doesn't actually have a IP capability, which means the device cannot connect to the internet. Best example would be again smartwatch. Smartwatch will have a Bluetooth, but Bluetooth cannot connect to the internet and then they cannot download the firmware. So the only way for them to do a firmware update, it's basically to connect to your mobile phone, and then your mobile phone will talk to the cloud and then do with the normal standard downloading the file. And then your mobile will convert that into Bluetooth commands, and then it will flash the firmware in the BLE devices. So here it's going to be slightly but more again straightforward, because Android, it's quietly been, there are so many ways you can intercept the traffic. You can, if there's SSL pinning, you can remove it, and standard mobile wallet testing part. there also you can download the firmware. Yeah. So second one is like there's something called as gateway. This is more something similar to the second one, but here the thing is like your mobile can talk Bluetooth. So what if my end device is not talking a standard protocol? So what if a vendor have implemented a custom wireless protocol, and then my mobile cannot obviously talk other protocol other than Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or NFC. So there will be something called as gateway or a hub. So where the hub can talk that proprietary protocol. So there again, hub can come in as will have multiple options or multiple features, like it will have Wi-Fi or Ethernet and also the custom RF protocol. So there the hub will act as a medium instead of mobile. And then there you can actually like figure out a way to put a proxy or create your own hotspot and then see what's the network traffic, and then you can do it. Or second way, more not a standard way, it's standard way, but it's a more complicated, messy way is basically like once when you know the firmware update is happening or once it's done, then you can actually stop the gateway, remove the whatever the flash memory or the chip that's inside the memory module that's inside, and then you can extract the whole file system. There, if you search inside, there are possibilities that the firmware update files will be inside the gateway. Yeah. So these are there are other ways also you can extract the firmware, but these are the most standard ways or the most things which you might encounter. Yeah. So now let's start with the tools. The tools are just pretty much which I think most of the people will be already aware if you're already in InfoSec community. So one is a Binwalk. So Binwalk, it's a very simple tool. So the way it works is, for example, if you have a file system called as SquashFS. So each SquashFS, or even let's say MP4 file. So how does any application knows this is MP4 file? It's not actually the extension that defines it. It's basically the header of the file. For example, if it's a PDF file, PDF has a specific header, and similarly for MP4, JPEG, PNG. So this Binwalk basically has all the database. It basically goes to the entire section of the firmware and then tells you what are the different headers that are there and what does the header mean, like what compression is it, and what is the file system of it. And also it will try to identify some signature inside the firmware and tells you whether it's an Android firmware or is it a Linux firmware or it's a Windows CE or is it a OpenSSL file or a private key or all those stuff. This is how your standard Binwalk output looks like. So you basically have two parts. One is your compressed data. It basically tells like the firmware file which we have. It's basically a compressed data. And then inside that, it found a magic byte for the file system called as SquashFS. And if you want to extract it, just put a switch -e, and then you can extract all the content. Yeah. So there's another also interesting tool called as Firmware Modkit. It relies again on the Binwalk. So once you have extracted it, and then you can only do static analysis or sort of like a dynamic analysis by extracting it. So what if you want to patch the binary? For example, there is one specific Linux file system firmware, and then you want to actually put let's say a GDB server, or you want to put a backdoor, so you can have a proper root shell. Then it'll be easy for you to debug and find more bugs. So this is a tool which basically extracts it, gives you the whole file system. You can modify your file, add file, change something, add a script and everything, and then you can also repack it back, and then you can use that firmware to also flash it. Again, flashing could be from any ways. For example, you can use the mobile interface to directly flash it, or you can use the web interface or the USB. Again, there are also a bit of security issue. The device should be smart enough to actually understand that this firmware has been tampered. Basically, they have to check for the signature. So that is also an issue, because any attacker can put any malicious firmware inside it, and then that is going to be a loss for them. For example, there are a lot of issues in the car lately. So where a car with a specific ECU have a different brand. One will have an extra feature, second one will have a different feature. So people have been trying to modify the firmware and exchanging the firmware, and they're flashing the firmware of a different car's firmware and a different car's firmware. So that is going to be a lot of issue, because people can claim, say like it's problem like in the firmware or something. So they'll go and claim for an insurance. This is again the same. this FMK will have a file called extract firmware, which basically extracts it, and then they have the folder, and then we'll say about extracting and patching and stuff. So how do you analyze it, and what are the good things you can analyze it? So most of the common things is like, and this is more specific to Linux based or OS which has a file system like any kind of a user space. For example, Windows CE will have a specific user space where people can put their, or the vendor can put their own custom code. Yeah. So there, once you extract that part, then you will get the binaries. Binaries, again, there are two types of binary. One, which are more generic binary. For example, in Linux, let's say BusyBox or wget or OpenSSL, they are more standard binaries. You can still find bugs, but that will be more towards finding bug in the Linux, the wget whole source code. But if you also look inside, there'll be more custom binaries. That's more vendor specific. So maybe that is responsible for, let's say, taking data from a socket and then saving it somewhere or doing some processing or take performing some other hardware-related actions. And third one is your web code. So web code is basically your HTML code or your JavaScript, whatever that's running in the server. Because happening, then it's hello.
Arun, I think we lost your screen share.
Okay. When did I disconnect?
I think few seconds back only, there was some lag in your voice as well.
Okay.
So yeah, you can start your screen share.
Okay.
And you can start with, this slide. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Now you can see it clearly, right? The screen?
Yeah, we can see it clearly.
Okay.
And your audio is also good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the previous slides, we have actually checked on so how to extract it and modify the firmware. So now the second thing is like where you're just extracting, you're not finding anything credible enough to get you a CVE or finding an issue in your pen test. So one of the few things which you can find is like one, if it is a standard OS, like standard commercial OS, like your Linux or Windows CE, where you have file system where your custom binaries resides. Again, it could be either your vendor specific library and binaries, or your standard Linux or your Windows CE based ones. So your target is basically to focus more on the vendor specific binaries, because that is all your target is, because you're not going to target the, let's say, the Linux based ones like your BusyBox or your wget or your OpenSSL and stuff. So third one would be your web code. So if your device has a web console where you have a login and you have some configuration files, then you have the source code of all the web server. So this will move you from having a black box web testing, but to a little bit more information, maybe close to white box or your gray box. And third one is your password. This is more standard these days because most of the device will have a backdoor with some specific port, let's say some telnet in a different non-standard port. So this will, once you check on the init file and everything, you'll get to understand what service is being run. And then you can also see what is the password that is there. Or even you can even find the main Linux main shadow file, which has the hashed version of all the passwords. And then the configuration file, which is exactly what I told. You can check on the configuration file and see if there is some kind of secure connection happening. And then most of the cases, they used to put the hard code the key in the configuration files. And then there, you can obviously get it. And your certificates, if the client is kind of communicating to the server using a specific certificate, you can even download those certificate. If there is a private key, you can also see it. And there are a lot of cases, for example, let's say if they're using a specific protocol other than HTTP, like your MQTT or COAP, they have their own certificate and keys. Even that could also be hard-coded. Yeah. So challenges, if you're talking about a normal Linux or Windows CE or even QNX and few other RTOS, it's more standard because they have a file system. And then there are a lot of debuggers and decompiler where you can start analyzing the code dynamically or statically. But there are a lot of other issues that you might encounter. One is a proprietary format. Yeah, this will be more appropriate if your device is a very low-end device. For example, if you're talking about smartwatch doesn't actually need you to run a Linux inside it. You just need to have a barebone code, and that should be fine. There it's going to be tricky because the firmware which you get is just a raw binary, where you will not have any kind of information on what exactly it is and which type of processor it is, whether it's an ARM, MIPS, or x86 or x64. So there it becomes a little bit tricky. Then you have to go inside multiple tools and do a trial and error and read the opcode and then make some reference to it. And then you can start with reversing it. The second one would be your firmware encryption. These days, vendors have started encrypting the firmware. For example, the case for your USB and your web interface firmware update, you have the firmware, but you can also modify it. But these days, they're encrypting the firmware. So which means even if you have the firmware, you cannot extract it because it's encrypted. So there are a lot of ways also you can attack it. One, for example, if you're flashing it on a device, so a device will have the key. So because the OS that's running inside is not encrypted, and then your OS will have a function or a specific application which is going to take your firmware which is encrypted, it's going to decrypt. So there, one of the way you can actually attack that is basically you somehow figure out the extract the internal flash memory, and then you can again go with the standard binwalk extracted. And then there, if you analyze the code or the binary, there are chances you might find the routine for decrypting the firmware. Once you have the routine, then you can go about doing the same thing and then decrypt the firmware. And also, there's another more strategy is also like, for example, a single device will have multiple versions of firmware. So in a specific version, let's say in the version 2, they are going to implement the secure firmware. So which means the version 2 will have the code, the main code, which basically does the encryption. So, and also that firmware in the internet will be not encrypted. So you can actually go back to a different firmware and then identify what encryption mechanism they have implemented, and then you can decrypt the next ones. So what do you actually do with static analysis? First, we already talked about extracting the firmware and understanding what exactly it's there in the firmware. So second, very simple tool is always use strings. So I do strings. Before I do anything, I start doing strings because strings will give you a lot of information. So a lot of information about, for example, what compiler did they use, or let's say if it is a proprietary firmware or a barebone firmware, I will get a little bit more information about what type of processor is it. Is it an ARM? Is it a MIPS? Or is it a RISC or something else? Yeah. And second is your hex dump. Hex dump is basically like you get to see all the thing in your normal hex view byte by byte. And then your last one is your identify instruction set, because this is very important for you to reverse it. Because for example, if you use whether IDA or your GUIDRA, it doesn't matter, because if your decompiler cannot understand the architecture, then, or if it cannot identify it properly, then your decompiler, whatever it's decompiled, it's not going to work. So this is also very important. Yeah. So how do you identify the instruction set? Is basically one of the proper ways that you can actually look for patterns. For example, push and pop. So push and pop is basically whenever there's something in the stack, you basically push it and also pop it. So the sequence is basically once you push it, you have to pop it at some point of the time. So which is basically sort of like a pattern. And then, for example, if it is an ARM has a specific, for example, in this case for thumb. So thumb is a 16-bit version of ARM. This is mostly used in an ARM-based microcontroller. For example, for push, it's basically the opcode is 6500, and then for pop, it's BT00. So in your hex dump, once you start looking at the code, you might be seeing a pattern of these values being repeated. So this is for ARM. So similarly, you can basically do a trial and error and then find the push and pop for different instructions. And maybe you can even write a small script to basically go through the whole thing and then identify what exactly the instruction set is. Yeah. So again, this is basically where you use the hex dump to do it. And there's another trial and error way is basically use the obj dump for a different, if you still cannot find it, you can use the obj dump. These are basically like your, not a proper decompiler, which basically converts your normal binary into your assembly language. So once you do it for ARM and MIPS, so for example, if your firmware is based on ARM, and then if you're using the MIPS obj dump, so the thing is like it's a completely different architecture. So the problem there would be mostly, for example, there'll be a lot of illegal instructions. For example, there'll be multiple pop-up or multiple push, which just actually makes sense because you cannot keep popping without pushing the data inside. It's more of a trial and error. Yeah. So dynamic analysis, what you can actually do is like you can use QEMU. So QEMU is like a cross-platform emulator. So where you can emulate an ARM-based binary, a Linux-based binary, your MIPS-based binary, or even x86 or a different architecture. And then once you have your emulator run, so for example, if it is opening a specific socket connection, then you can start fuzzing it. You can just, most of the cases it will go with blind fuzzing. But if the project is open source, then you can actually use AFL or some other tool to basically be more protocol aware fuzzer, and then you can start with finding bugs. And finding issue, it could be anything. Even you can start with finding a bug in the web interface. You can go to your standard XSS, CSRF, and all those issues also. And then debugging is basically like once you, this is more for a bug where you need to debug something. For example, if there's a memory corruption issue, then you have to hook it to a GDB server, connect it to GDB, and then hook it to IDA or some other tool. And then you start with understanding why this crash is happening. And then you'll go about writing your exploit and whatnot. Yeah. Now let's start with a little bit of hands-on. I have a, let me increase the font. Yeah. So this is not a router's firmware. Seagate has a hard disk. So this is a normal hard disk which has a Wi-Fi. Basically, just it has a battery also. So basically, once you connect it, it will create a hotspot, and then wirelessly using a NAS kind of configuration, basically you can put everything, your data extracted from your wireless. So it's basically a binary file. So first thing is always to identify what type of file it is. It may be saying it's a bin file, a standard binary file, but it's better to use the tools to identify what exactly the file is. So I'm going to use the file command, and then I will put this. Yeah. So in this case, it's saying like, even though the extension is bin, it's basically telling her it's a tar archive. Basically, it's an archive. So you can either use binwalk or you can use your standard tool. I will use the standard tool in this case. I'm going to use 7zx and then the file. Yeah. So in this case, it says like it has 4 folders and then 22 files. Yes. So now I have the firmware being extracted. So in this case, the firmware is not encrypted because I was able to extract it, and then I can see a lot of information in this. Yeah. So now let's look for a little bit more. Let's start. There's something called as, so in usual case, you can go inside the bin, and then you can see here, and then it has something called ASM update and descriptor, firmware descriptor. So I'm guessing this is the updater tool, which is going to, let's say, take a specific firmware. I think ASM firmware, bootcode firmware, MCU firmware. It's going to use this to flash it. In this case, you can actually start with reversing this function, this file and then understand what is happening. Now let's start with a little bit more easier one. So we have something called as rootfs. So rootfs is your root file system. So, and if you again put files on the rootfs, so we have to go back. Yeah. So in this it says a gzip compressed data, and then it's a rootfs.tar. Now let's use, again, I'm going to use this one, rootfs. It's extracting the tar file. So now I have the tar file. Now I will use the tar tool to extract it. I'm going to create it into a root folder. Okay, I think it extracted the same location. I think that should be fine. Yeah. So now you can see all these standard Linux file system being extracted. For example, if you go inside your etc, you have your standard etc stuff, and then if you open the shadow file, so here is your hard-coded root shadow file. So this is just a hash, and then one is for, I think, MD5, I'm not sure. So MD5, and then you have your salt, and then your hash data. So you cannot not just find that, you can find other critical information also. For example, let's look for, find is a tool basically finds all the file. I'm going to do find. Let's look for, let's say, server.key. Yeah, so in this case, there is one specific file. So in this case, there is some kind of a server key that is there. That is basically, if you look at the path, it seems like it is something to do with the web server and also the REST API. Maybe this is the thing, key responsible for communicating it with the device using the thing. And then let's read it. It's basically the private key. Yeah. So similarly, you can find other stuff. So in this case, it's very, very common and very stuff. So let's go into a little bit more, which is a little bit more in unfamiliar territory. So let's go into MCU firmware. Yeah. So the thing is like a device, in this case, it's a hard disk. So hard disk will have multiple options. For example, if it's a battery, if it has a charger, which means your Ubuntu has to monitor the charge, which means there has to be some kind of a hardware level interface. So in most cases, they use something called a microcontroller. So they are a little bit more of a smaller version of your microprocessor, but with all the peripherals already inside one single chip. So in this case, we have a multiple binary file. Let's do the normal. I'll take the first firmware. It just says a data file. There's nothing there. Now let's try to do cat maybe. It just gives some random gibberish data. It says USB wait. It looks like the text section of the firmware. If you do strings, so also if you see, it is used as a E50021, maybe it looks like a charge controller. And if you look at it, you will get an idea about what exactly it is. It says like SOC2, put notification, Mission 1, it's called as STM32F0. Now let's just, okay, how do I use this? Yeah, so if I search for it, it's basically a ARM Cortex M0 microcontroller. And if you look at it, they have so many, let's say, version of it, and then they have a different version of the flash size. There are a few ways you can take a guess for that. Is basically, if you look at the file size, this one is 63K, which means we can assume, again, it's all assumption. You can assume the one which we are dealing with should have a 64K flash memory. Let's go to the resource. We have to look for something called as data sheet. Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, we have a data sheet. And if you look at it, this is basically 64K flash. Again, this is again trial and error. There are chances that it could be a different controller with a different offset. Again, you need to be a little bit more careful here to understand, maybe find more signature in the firmware to identify what exactly the exact microcontroller we are dealing with. Yeah, so this is basically the Cortex M4 64K. You will get all the features. So now our target is to basically decompile it. So let's use Ghidra. So Ghidra is a sort of like an open source reverse engineering tool where if you have a binary, then you can actually like reverse engineer it. So if we go file, import, you can select your file, select the file to import. Since it's a non-standard, it's just saying a raw binary. So it doesn't actually understand what binary this is. So you have to select the language, which basically tells me like, since I know it's a ARM Cortex, and then I can select for ARM Cortex. ARM Cortex 32-bit, and then Indian is always little Indian in my case. It's just like ARM Cortex, thumb, little Indian. Press OK, and then still not yet done. Options. You need to tell the firmware what address location you have to actually start from. So for that, go back to your data sheet. You can either manually search or, yeah, it's something called as memory map. Yeah. So here, if you look at here, usually your code resides in your flash memory because that's where your whole OS boots from. So if you look at here, the address of the flash memory is actually not from your 00. It basically starts from 0x08 and then 60. So this is the base address. So because if there is a jump instruction or jump or your go to, let's say jump to a specific address. So if you miss that address, then it won't go to that specific function. So if your address is not exactly in the same offset, so this should be your starting address. Let's insert this here, 0x8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it's all done. Press OK. Show an error. It'll ask you to analyze. Just go with the standard settings. Nothing needs to be changed here. Yeah, I think it's done now. Yeah, so now you can go with your reversing your standard one. Let's say you go for reference to this, and then you have right now the file has been properly decomposed because if it is not decomposed, the specific function will not actually reference it to a specific ones. Because your address will be different. So in this case, I got a proper reference to the specific call. So I just click this. And then you can see the code responsible for it. So in this case, the binary is almost similar to a very, very highly stripped binary. So you will not have way too many function names. You will have only the function name because that is how in embedded everything is sort of like function. So where even printf actually a printf, there it goes to the you will have to understand it. So best way to actually and for example, if there's a call which sending to a specific address, you can actually check here. For example, you have something called a peripheral block. So peripheral block basically gives you all the interface. For example, if it has a sensor and switching a serial communication of some hardware protocol. So this one, all the information about where exactly you can yeah. So for example, GPIO 5. So GPIO is where you connect your LED motor or your switch. So the address for that space is basically in this range. So by looking at
Arun, we lost your voice again. Arun, we can't hear you. You are on mute.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did you lose me?
I think on the screen only, but from the start.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, for example, to understand where exactly something is being written to, let's take this as an example. For example, if it is writing it to some specific address, you can see it's trying to write to specific offset. Let me check. Yeah, it has a different address, so I'll have to check on where exactly the functions are. I'll not actually reverse this binary completely. Yeah, so if you find like an offset, let's say 0400 or something, which is actually there in this range, and if you look a little bit down, you can see like that one specifically means it belongs to USART. And then if you go inside the USART function, then you will know what address has what register. So by looking at this stuff, you can actually understand it to some extent. Okay, when this function is responsible for printing the data in the serial port. So it's slightly tougher than your standard Linux binary, but that's not it's still a way, but it's a little bit more tougher for you to understand and reverse it properly. Yeah, I think. Yeah, so I think I've taken more than 45 minutes. If you want to ping me, or you can for analysis, or if you have firmware which you're stuck somewhere, you can always take me this email address. I'll be happy to help.
Thank you, Arun, for an overview of IoT firmware reversing. Indeed, security analysis of the device firmware is a very crucial part of IoT security auditing. Uh, I have shared few links in the chat. These are the blogs written by Payatu Bandits, and these are very much explanatory. So with this, you can get started with IoT security and firmware reversing. So now is the time for Q&A. So if anyone has any question, you can ask using the chat option, which is there. Arun, we have two questions already in the chat. So if you can go through those questions. Arun, you are on mute.
Yeah, I think I cannot see the questions from here. I'm guessing
because yeah, okay. So so there is one question from Veera Babu. Signed firmwares, any chances to break it?
So it depends upon which signing mechanism which they are using. So there are a lot of collision attacks which you can perform if the firmware is using a vulnerable version type of the signing mechanism.
Okay. There is one more question. There is update a few outside as well, right? I do not know the context of this question. Maybe you want to explain it more, Silipon. There's one more question, Arun, from
Yeah.
Ankur. If someone wants to start with the learning, from where to get the labs?
So this is a standard question which I get. So when talk about IoT or any embedded, you won't find too many labs. And also the problem which I find with people who are trying to build something labs for hardware, they are not as realistic as a real time ones. The best one, what I would suggest, is to actually go for getting any device, be the cheap device, get a device, and then start reversing it there. That will give you a little bit more of learning from a real-time perspective. And resource, the problem with IoT is the resource slightly scattered. So you have to use your Googling skill and then to understand what exactly you're trying to achieve. And labs, I won't really go, not a big fan of doing a labs to learn something. It's okay for learning basics. But at least when it comes to IoT, there's a huge gap between what the real device is providing and what your CTFs or your standard things which people are trying to create is there. It's completely different.
Okay, thank you, Arun. There's one more question. What is the basic requirement to start with IoT security?
There's no specific requirement as such. For example, if you're already working on the InfoSec space, for example, if you're working on, let's say, web penetration testing, then you can actually, instead of just starting everything from scratch in IoT, you can actually base that part. Let's say if you're good in web, use that specific ones because IoT has all the components you are already working on. It has the network part, it has the web part, it also have Android part, it has all the kernel and everything. So if you're good in something, don't deviate from what you're doing, focus on that, and then try to relate that part with any IoT device. For example, if you're good on mobile application, there'll be tons of IoT devices which communicates with an app, and then communicates with whatever the device is. So there you can use your own skill set, and then you can use that to slightly migrate to IoT. We're learning everything is from the scratch. It's a way, but it's completely up to you on how to take it.
All right. There is one more question, Arun. Is it possible to modify and rebundle the binary to break the logic of the firmware? If
Yes,
yes,
you can. Yeah.
okay. So the next follow-up question is, Arun, how do developers fix this?
Fix the which one, which issue?
So the same question, is it possible to modify and rebundle the binary to break the logic of the firmware?
Yeah. So when you talk about the firmware, it depends upon which firmware you're talking about. So you're talking about the firmware, for example, the firmware that's inside the flash memory, or you're talking about the binary which you get from the firmware update. So the one, if you're talking about the firmware which you download on the flash, so one of the way to fix is basically to have a signature. So each firmware update should have a signature matching. So, for example, if there's a small change in the firmware, then it should not flash it. So, in most of these days, most of the devices have a signature check. And for the second one, for example, if you're changing directly inside the, let's say the device, let's say extracting the firmware, modifying it, patching it back, then again, it's a little bit more tricky. There are ways you can still check the signature. For example, if your device has some kind of a trusted execution core, then you can put all your signature and all your keys inside the TEE module, and then you can use that TEE core to check whether the firmware that's being booting is actually secure or not. For example, your standard Linux, also your standard laptop, they also have a secure boot. So if your OS is not a secure OS or it doesn't have a signature, it will not boot. Embedded device also will happen. There, the problem is like one, the processor or the controller which supports the secure boot and all the trust of root and everything, they're slightly bit more expensive and bit not in the not familiar with the developers. So it's possible, but that comes with a cost.
I hope that answers your question, Ved. Next question we have from Rajesh Kumar. Apart from Chemo, is there any other virtualization tool for dynamic analysis?
For other dynamic analysis, I am not aware of it, but there are other things like I'm not sure chilling and few other films which I've heard of. But I have not actually worked. I primarily use Kemu for it. Yeah, so I have personally worked with Kemu extensively. Not sure about other framework which can do cross compilation, like cross emulation.
All right. There is one more request from Akshaya. She's saying, kindly make session on intercepting BLE traffic. So we have a small poll and we want answers from you. It will appear on your screen and I'm launching the poll as of now. So what topics would you like to see in future Payatu webinars related to IoT security? Just let us know your options and we will arrange the webinars as per. Okay, as of now, we have one more question, Arun. It's from Atul. He's asking, could you show more, could you show some dynamic analysis?
Yes, I can show dynamic analysis. So, like right now or for the later sessions, I can take just the dynamic analysis for the next session if they are interested.
Later, okay. Atul is answering later sessions. Sure, Atul. We can have a dedicated session on this in the later webinars as well. Do we have more questions? Arun, can you see the question which is there in the chat, or do you want me to read?
Let me check. Where is the chat? I cannot see the chat. I can only see the poll which you created.
Okay.
No, I cannot see the chat.
Okay, so I'll read it out for you. Okay. Sir, I do have a doubt with the LZMA. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Compressions in firmware. While I was going through one firmware, I have noted some certificate file being stored in an LZMA compression, and I used Binwalk to extract it.
Okay.
Ajmal, is that your question, or can you elaborate on the question more? And I have got extracted it to a data file. Okay. But I was not able to get the real cert file.
Okay, so in a lot of cases, you might encounter a false positive. So Binwalk, it's not really way too smart. It basically checks for the offset. So there are a lot of cases that will be false positive. So it may say like LGMA. So what you can actually do is take, also there's another issue in the LGMA package. Maybe you can try installing a recent version of the LGMA extraction. I forgot the exact one, LGMA, that binary, and then that might help it. Yeah, even I had the similar issue where it will not extract the LGMA properly. I think I would suggest you to check on your dependencies, because sometimes dependencies also doesn't work properly with different version of Python 2 and 3. So one that you can check, or then the second version is like, don't use the Binwalk to extract it. So what I would suggest is like, get the file offset for the LGMA from the Binwalk, and then use your DD command to split it from your main firmware, and then use your standard extraction tool to extract it.
We have one more question. Which tool can be used to intercept and modify ZigBee traffic?
Intercept, you cannot actually intercept the ZigBee communication like your normal Bluetooth or other protocols. So you can only sniff the communication. So there are a lot of sniffers out there. For example, the most famous one is your RC USB stick. And then we at Payato also have our own sniffer. Zigbee auditor. So where you can use that to sniff the Zigbee communication, and then you can go with your standard replay attack or a different attack. There are like a lot of attacks which you can perform using Zigbee.
All right. I think we have crossed the scheduled time. So it's time to move on. Payatu has been trusted by Fortune 1000 companies across 20 plus countries. And can you see the slide? Yes. As communicated earlier, we also offer a full IoT ecosystem security assessment, including hardware, cloud, web, and mobile interface. So if you have security services or training requirements for your organization, you can share those requirements with the link mentioned in this slide. I'm also sharing the link with you in the chat. Just give me a second. So, all right. You can stalk us on social media as well. Follow us, since whatever new we publish on payatu.com, we announce that on social media, whether it is a new blog, advisory, and many other things. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Recording of this webinar will be posted there. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Goodbye until the next webinar. If you have more questions, you can ask us on social media. Also, Arun mentioned his email ID in the webinar itself. So you can also ping him directly if you have more questions on that. Also, we will have more sessions related to IoT security in coming weeks. So stay tuned and thank you everyone for joining us today. Goodbye until the next webinar.